Yeah, so this is just a tutorial on how to open up people with Narmaya, more focused for beginners. I'll be covering a few aspects from frame traps and useful special moves to use with helping to open up opponents. So let's get started. So the first thing we're going to look at is her Genji Stance, and we're going to look at the frame traps. So Genji Stance doesn't have as many frame traps as her Kaguya Stance, since that one is the more offensive, but it still does have some things you can do, and those are 5L, 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 5M, 5L, 5H, which is the universal frame trap, and then 2L, 5L, which is a stagger, so you need to just put a little bit of a gap in between the 2L and the 5L so that if they press a button, they will get hit. Now, just to show these off, so you see how they look, where if a person mashes in between them, you'll see that they get hit. So I'm going to set the dummy to do her standing light, which is her fastest button, and this is how it looks. So we're going to start off with 5L, 5L. So you see she got hit because it said counter hit on the screen. 5L, 5M, same thing. 5L, 5H with the universal frame trap, and then 5L, 2M, and then 2L, 5L, 2L, 5L. As you saw there, I got hit the first time because I put too big of a gap in between the 2L and the 5L, so you need to make sure that you keep it tight, just a slight gap, so that if they press a button, they will get hit. So the use of these frame traps is essentially just to punish your opponent for trying to mash buttons, especially lights, in between your block strings. So this is just one part of the structure to opening up your opponent. There are other things you're going to be doing, but it's important to incorporate these into your game plan to help with pressuring your opponent so that they might crack and push a button when they shouldn't, so you can get a free combo and do some good damage to them. So now we're gonna look at her useful special moves for offense as well. Okay, so now we're gonna look at her special moves in Genji Stance that can help you on offense. So the first one we're gonna look at is her 236M. As you see, this is plus 10 on block, which is really good, but it comes with the downside of it takes some time before the actual move comes out. As you see, in comparison to our 236L, which is fast, our 236M has some charge up time. That being said, it does have its uses, especially on defense, because you can do things like frame trap with it. How do you do that? Well, there are several ways you can. The more common way you'll probably do is by doing a 236L after the 236M. So it looks something like this. Or you can also do a 236H afterwards, and that will also frame trap. So just to show it off. So Gita is going to do her stand light, and I'm going to, and you see she got hit, and the same thing with the heavy. This is pretty useful for the range of around here. That is because I would recommend doing 236M up close at all, because it is very easy to get hit out of this because of how much startup this move has. However, doing a bit around here where things are a bit safer, then it's a more viable option at this range. One thing you have to know, however, is that this frame trap loses the jumps. So just to show that off. And you see the dummy was able to jump out of it. One thing you can do, however, in this scenario is, out of this range, you can do her 236M into her medium or heavy buttons to catch the jump. Sorry, that wasn't like that, and like that. And finally, the Genji Stance, we'll look at a 236H. This move is +2, which is really nice. Up close, it means that if they press something after she did it, she would always win. Like that. However, you're not gonna use this move like that on offense very often, if at all. You'll have to be doing it after a block string of some kind. Usually off of a auto combo block string, which leaves her at this range. What this means, however, is that unlike the first scenario where she could just mash light, if you mash the light in that scenario, it will trade with the opponent. Like that. What you want to do in that scenario is two things. You can either do her 2M in her Genji Stance or her 5M in her Kaguya Stance. Now you saw in both of those scenarios the dummy got hit because Narmaya still had the advantage in those scenarios. These are useful for those scenarios where your opponent might feel that because there's some distance they might be able to press a button, but this helps them realize that they can't do it. So now, before we go on to a Kaguya Stance, I'm going to talk about her auto combo a little bit. So the first thing I want to talk about is that Narmaya doesn't have a grounded overhead outside of the universal one from the auto combo. It is -4, so even if they do block it, it's not like they can punish you because it's safe. The good thing about it, however, is that on hit it is +1. Now, if you notice, this is similar spacing to the spacing for her 236H. So that means that the same things you did there, you can also do here. Yeah, like that. So you see they got hit in both of these scenarios as well. The thing I'll say though about the first one is that you might have to mash the 2M a little bit to make sure it comes out as fast as possible, because if you mistime it, you can get hit. But the second one with the Kaguya Stance 5M seems a lot more consistent, so I'd recommend you go for that one instead, especially since it puts you into her more offensive stance as well. So let's look at our Kaguya Stance now. Our Kaguya Stance has all the frame chops the Genji Stance has, plus some extra ones. So I'll just show off the ones universal to both stances real quick again. So 5L, 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 5M, 5L, 2M, 5L, 5H, 5L, and that's it. She does have some extra ones though because of her 2M. Now this move is +1 on block. This means that she can actually frame trap into it. Like that. One nice thing about it especially is that it's a very strong tool that has really nice range. So you can frame trap from a bit further out with it, so you don't have to be right up on the opponent, which is something nice to have. As well as she gets some other options as well, so she can do things like 2M, 5L, 2M, 5M as well, which are some nice frame traps to have. Now with all these frame traps, the goal is to get your opponent antsy or to just try to get them to crack on the pressure from blocking a lot. Her 2M is especially useful for that because you can do some things like 2M, 2M, walk up 2M, 2M. This is essentially you stealing a turn, but oftentimes your opponent might let you get away with it because they don't want to press a button and get hit. So you'll do things like 2M, 2M, slight walk up into like a 5M, 5H, or 2M, 2M into a throw, or 2M, 2M, sorry, 2M, 2M, 5M, things like that. You essentially want to mix and match the frame traps, the special moves, to just help keep the pressure on and eventually get your opponent to crack and get opened up. So that's about it for the frame traps with her special moves. We're gonna look at her useful specials for this Kaguya stance. Okay, now let's look at the useful specials for Kaguya stance. The main one we're going to be looking at is her 214H, which is this, and her 214U, which is this. You could also technically use her 214M because at certain ranges this can be plus, like around here, yeah, you can be +1. That being said, it's just such a far range that you won't come up that often in pressure like that. So this is essentially mid-range range that you're dealing with here. So we're just going to be looking especially at the 214H, which depending on how it lands, it can either be +1 or +4. If it lands in the front, it's +1. If it lands behind the opponent, it's +4. Or it can be +4. Right there. See? Okay. So the useful thing about this is if your opponent mashes during your block string and you do this move, if they use a heavy or medium attack, they will get tagged and get hit for it. So just to show this off. So there she did a medium and she got hit for it. If they do a light, they can recover in time and block, but they still have to block, which would mean it's your turn. Oftentimes, your opponent will most likely want to do something like a DP to deal with this, but she can actually use this to avoid DPs. This is character specific though, and it depends on the DP. If you're dealing with an opponent whose DP moves them forward, you can use the property on 214H where if you input forward, she moves forward even more when doing the move. So just to show that off, this is me doing the move without holding forward. This is me doing it with holding forward. You see how much she moves? Okay, so here's how it looks if you do this and the opponent DPs. And you get a free punish. But like I said before, this only works on DPs where the opponent moves forward. If the opponent remains stationary, the DP hits around the back of their head, or is active for a really long time, then she will always get beat. Also, this loses to all ultimate skill DPs as well, from what I'm seeing. That being said, it is still a pretty strong tool to use, because it can help you to steal turns in other ways, where if your opponent was probably looking to check you with a low attack, then you'll be able to get a hit in, or if they manage to recover in time, it'll still be your turn. Okay, now finally we're going to look at our 214H. This move is +4 on block, and it leaves you pretty close to your opponent. You are within her jab and her light and medium and heavy ranges, so you can try to frame trap at this after the attack lands if your opponent gets antsy and tries to press a button. Like that. One thing I'll say though is I would more recommend just using this move to catch out throws than anything, because if your opponent presses like their their light or their medium, or possibly even their heavy, depending on how the hitboxes where it works, Narmaya has a good chance of being knocked out of the move. Like that. So what I would say is, in scenarios where you would go for a throw, I would rather you use this to bait the throw. So for example, on your opponent's wake up, you could go for this move to bait the throw. Like that. Which is really strong, and you get some really good damage off of baiting throws with this move. In theory, you can use the move in box strings to steal turns, but I find it's not worth it because there's a pretty high risk of you getting knocked out of it. I'm gonna talk a little bit about 6XL. I didn't really want to talk about it much because I was trying to structure this guide around using her frame traps and special moves more than the 6XL, but it is still a really strong tool. So 6XL is +2 on block. It leaves you pretty close, so you can do a frame trap of some kind. In a lot of instances, you can probably get away with doing something like 6XL to help push your opponent to the corner, as well as mixing in some block strings as well to help push them even further. So something like can get you pretty close to the corner if you're doing it from like a mid-screen space. That being said, you can get knocked out the second 6XL if they read it, but oftentimes your opponent might think you're going for a button, which can let you get another one in. So like with all the other things we're talking about, you have to take down and rotate the options to help keep your opponent guessing about what you're doing, which will help you with opening up your opponent. And that is it for this guide. I hope I gave you some ideas of what you should do with Narmaya on offense, as well as helping with formulating a game plan for her. If you learned something, let me know in the comments. If there's something you feel is important and should be added, you can also post it there as well. And that's it. I hope you learned something, and until next time, have a good one. Peace.